Chapter 17 is the nitty-gritty. It's the politics of schooling. And I wrestled with this idea for literally years, trying to find some way to communicate the brilliant invention that keeps us static, that keeps school reform producing the same thing we had before we reformed the schools. At the heart of the durability of mass schooling is a brilliantly designed power fragmentation system which distributes decision-making so widely among so many warring interests that large-scale change is impossible without a guidebook. You have to know who actually holds the actual string of power. I'll give you a hint. It's never the teachers' union, regardless of what you hear. Ain't true. The power's fragmented into 18 separate compartments, each one of which I talk about in the book. People who accomplish modest-sized changes in the system have a map to know which people to waste time on and which people to avoid, even though they seem to be at the center of power. For those of you out there with a gleam in your eye saying, I've heard that idea before, you're right. You heard that idea in Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, written in the first quarter of the 17th century, in which Hobbes says that wherever power seems to be, that you can be sure is not where it is. And the whole shtick, sort of an Eastern Yiddish word, the whole shtick of getting anything accomplished is actually not to beat your head against the ladders of authority, because they don't lead to the authority. It's to discover where the authority is and home in on that. So, the politics of schooling. And of course, each one of these compartments of supposed power have to be paid off. That's why these darn government schools are so expensive. I'll give you just one example from my experience. In the last school I taught in, I was given a former science room on the third floor of the building for my room. I'm saying a former science room on purpose because those huge slate tables with sinks in were still in the room. But sometime during the school year, the custodian came in and removed all those desks. What he didn't notice, or probably was just indifferent about, is that the legs had been embedded in the floor, and when he removed the desks, in some places there were holes that went straight down to the next classroom. And so my kids, being an enterprising lot, would make spitballs, and dare I say it, would even wad up used toilet paper and drop it through those holes into the screaming class beneath. Eventually this reached the principal's ears, and he came to my door and he said, I demand that you stop that. And I said I asked for permission to stop it. It would have taken 10 minutes. I'd go out and buy some patches, and I'd put them down myself over these holes, and that would be the end of the temptation. But I was informed by the custodian that that was illegal. So he stormed out of the room, and then he came back, and he said, right, you have to go through the chain of command. Okay, I said, start me on this procedure of getting these holes repaired. But don't ask me to stand over these holes because they're all over the room, and if I look one way, the stuff will get down another hole. They're dropping also ball bearings down those holes, which is really smart when they bounce off your noggin. So the custodian wouldn't tell me this, but eventually, by dint of gruesome research, I discovered how many sign-offs had to be made before a team was dispatched from 25 miles away in Brooklyn to come and fix that repair. 8 separate levels of authority had to sign off on that, beginning with the custodian of my building and then the principal. But there were still 6 hoops to jump through, and then they didn't come. I misspoke. They didn't come to fix the holes. They came to inspect the problem. I want you to know the whole procedure took 8 months for work that any journeyman could have finished in a half an hour, including purchasing the supplies to do it. And duplicate that experience by thousands and thousands of repairs in the 1,000-odd schools in New York City that are under the central system. And now are we just beginning to see a glimmer of how this power system has been set up to guarantee that nobody can change the inexorable progress and product of mass forced schooling. Absolutely fascinating. The last chapter is called Breaking Out of the Trap. And I'll just read the epigraph. The only conceivable way to emerge from this trap, from which no further human, I found a typo, progress is possible, is to repudiate centralization of schooling in the form of national goals, national tests, national teaching licenses, school-to-work plans, and the rest of the utopian package, which in California is daily being tried out here and there. You guys are among the most villainous states in the country. I'd say the only one that matches the damage that California does is Texas, home of the legendary, well, I won't say it, this isn't a political program. You dictate textbook construction for the whole United States, and the reason for it is simple. Rather than fragment textbook buying so that teams of salesmen would be traveling constantly all over the state trying to sell their product, you bulk buy for this nation of 35 million people, so that anyone who gets a contract to supply California with books gets a contract to supply California with millions of books. It's instant wealth. Well, because of that, no textbook publisher wants to make 19 versions of his book. What California wants, or what Texas wants, because they do the same thing, is then force-fed to the rest of the United States. And what you have wanted for all my lifetime is not books that train the intellect. You've wanted books that propagandize the spirit, that socialize children. Your books are riddled with errors, some of them so comic that if I say them, you won't believe them.